You can go for it. I don't know what I'm recommending. I hate everything these days. Again, I hate everything again. For a while there, I didn't hate everything, but hate everything again. Go ahead.
He walked out in the gray light and stood, and he saw for a brief moment the absolute truth of the world. The cold, relentless circling of the intestate earth. Darkness implacable. The blind dogs of the sun in their running. The crushing black vacuum of the universe. And somewhere 200 animals trembling like ground foxes in their cover. Borrowed time and borrowed world and borrowed eyes with which to sorrow it.
And lo, for the earth was empty of form, and void, and darkness was all over the face of the deep, and we said, look at that fucker dance.
Welcome to Heat Death of the Universe. We are iTunes number 8, K-pop, divorce, gambling, debt, loan shark mafia, North Korean defector, Parasite Squid Game podcast. It is 7:57 p.m. Like the plane. Korea Standard Time.
There's a 757 plane.
Yeah.
I've been on one.
It's bigger than the 747, I hear.
But not bigger than me.
Nope. You're a billion times bigger than a virus, a million times bigger than a 747. This is all podcast lore. Canon.
That's how math works.
Timestamp for posterity. Thursday, October 7th, 2021. Year of our Lord. Oppa Gundam style. Do you sense a theme brewing here with all the just word salad I've put forth? I think we're going to talk about a little country I like to call Korea.
I don't. I call it that fucking place.
You call it the Rock? The Roke?
Rock. I've heard people call it that. I don't think I've ever actually called it the Rock.
I feel like instantly I just imagined like a frat boy like high-fiving his friend and saying like, living in the Rock.
The people I knew were like military guys that I've hung out with in Korea.
Yeah, it's okay. That makes even more sense than the frat thing that I just imagined. Basically, a muscular type fellow with a backwards baseball cap of some sort.
I was thinking about joining the military again.
Recently?
You can join until you're 42. I was thinking, maybe I should quit all this nonsense, join the army.
You know, that's like what people laugh about Hunter Biden for, how he tried to join the Navy when he was like 50.
Yeah.
Or he did, and then he got kicked out immediately for testing positive for
He wasn't 50, was he?
Well, maybe that's too old, but he was like at the very like limit that you can be to join, I think.
Yeah, 42. 42 is the very limit. I looked it up.
I'm not going to look it up now, but I just have intuitive feeling Hunter Biden somehow was like, because of his connection to his dad, like maybe they made an exception for him. Because I think he was older than 42.
His exception was he joined as an officer. To join as an officer, the cutoff's like 34.
Oh, so that...
To enlist, it's 42. So yes, he joined as an officer, and he shouldn't have been able to join as an officer, but he got a special exception. Usually, you can be a normie and get those exceptions, but you usually have to be like a medical doctor because, lo and behold, they're hard to come by.
You know a lot about the military. You really have been thinking about it.
I really considered it. I doubt we'll ever get socialism in America, and it's the closest thing we have.
This is sadly true, I guess. Yeah.
Okay.
Before we really get going here,
I'm not going to join the military.
Before I even explain the premise of today's episode, I'm going to do something I don't think I've done before, at least not like as a segment up top. We'll call this corrections.
Cry? Eat?
Eat?
Cry? Eat? Yeah. We know you don't eat.
Or laugh. You said I don't laugh. I don't like comedy. But now I also don't cry. We're building this whole mythology around me that couldn't be further from the truth. I like it. I'm the stoic, ascetic monk. No. Okay, correction the first. We talked about the Julian Assange CIA plan to assassinate Assange. And I said that the story broke on Yahoo News, which technically is not true, I guess. A listener did send us an email to point this out. And I did know that, in fact, in 2020, I think in like May 2020, Max Blumenthal wrote like an in-depth article about Assange and the CIA and basically these various plots. I didn't read it yet, but I don't know if he actually mentioned the assassination plan part. He did mention a lot of the other stuff. I know that. So really a lot of the story was broke first on the Gray Zone like more than a year ago. I think the only reason people are kind of citing the Yahoo thing is because it just came out, but also maybe it's just a matter of like the Gray Zone gets a lot of flack by the establishment, we'll say, and obviously the people who wrote the Yahoo story, as like Michael Isikoff, they're more mainstreamly respected. But anyway, so a small correction there. Also, I was talking about, in the same episode, I was talking about Russiagate basically being a bunch of bullshit, and that there were far better ways to try to impeach Trump. And another listener also pointed out to me that I may have been sort of making it sound like they never tried to impeach Trump. So if that was the impression I was giving, I didn't mean to do that. I do know that they impeached Trump twice, unsuccessfully, but they did it, but they didn't remove him from office, obviously. Final one. We talked about how, it would have been our previous episode last Monday. We said it was Hangul Day. No, this was...
It wasn't. It was Foundation Day.
Monday before last Monday is what we said was Hangul Day, right? Oh, no. Hangul Day is coming up.
This Monday that happened this week was Foundation Day for Korea. It was like I don't really know what foundation means, but that's what all my students said. Because I went to work that day thinking it was Hangul Day. And I was like, today's Hangul Day. And they're like, no, teacher, it's Foundation Day. I was like, damn.
They also say, what the fuck is Hangul?
Hangul. Handle Day.
Yeah, not that that
Handle
not that,
Day.
that it really matters, but we did make a point of saying, "Hey, it's Hangul Day, celebrating the written word of Korea being invented." That's our upcoming Monday. The day that we said that was actually, it's called in English National Foundation Day. In Korean, I think it translates to like sky or heaven opening day. And it's this weird mythology about the founding of like the first Korean people as like a sort of almost like separate species from humanity.
Is it like the bear and the?
There's some weird shit with a bear and a man from the sky and a tiger and some garlic and some other food. And it all is kind of jumbled in my head. I couldn't really tell you the proper story off the top of my head.
That story.
It does involve like sort of
people.
man on animal sex that produces like the first human being. But anyway, so on that subject, I guess, the subject of Korean mythology, we're going to turn to a very like detailed and lengthy kind of comment and like series of questions we got from a listener a little while back in response to when we talked about Squid Game. We were answering the same person's questions about that, or trying to, but
Oh, Jingo Game.
yeah,
Do you know people? I just want to talk about something with Squid Game. Fuck all of you motherfuckers who are watching it dubbed. I can't believe there's an option to watch it dubbed. That's just fucking disgusting. If you're sitting down and watching a dubbed live action show, just stop. Go do something better with your time.
Yeah.
But I do appreciate voice actors, and I often think voice acting would be the most fun job in the world, and I'd love to be a voice actor for a cartoon. But, you know, if someone was like, be a voice actor for a foreign film, I would say, fuck no.
Yeah, that's weird.
Those are real people expressing their real emotions. You lose so much. Anyway,
I've heard people say that it's like elitist to be anti-dubbing, but I just totally disagree. Yeah, it just sucks.
I mean, I think with some animation there has been good dubs.
It's totally different though.
I'm just against it, and
with animation it's one thing, but like,
yeah.
Anyway, I agree.
I don't know why
outrage.
I got on that.
Well,
I was just talking to some people who said we watched it all dubbed, and I was like, oh, what's wrong?
You got to
with
cut them loose from your life, man.
I did. I sent them cease and desist letters, and they're no longer part of my foundation.
I guess on a just related note, as long as we're gonna dilly-dally for a moment, I saw some
chastise people.
I saw some interesting stuff about how the translations for Squid Game are like really like wretched, according to like people that are fluent in both languages. I mean, you and I can speak some Korean, but we're pretty shitty. I mean, even if we were good, we probably wouldn't be able to pick up on like the subtleties or whatever. But I saw some, I guess I'm assuming she's like Korean American, just because she's speaking with like a perfect like kind of American accent. But she showed some examples. This was just someone on Twitter, and it was interesting because it's not just like, oh, the translation's off, but it like changes like the politics almost of the show, like the way the translations are in certain moments.
Interesting.
Yeah, I wish I could remember like one of the examples off the top of my head, but I don't know. Apparently there's some ongoing discourse about and it's from people who like the show, but like were kind of like they were also like screaming at the TV about the translation, because they were just they're watching it like with friends who don't speak Korean, so they have the English subtitles on, and yeah. But I've heard too that part of it is that Netflix, just like since they have so many fucking shows and they translate into so many languages generally, they just kind of overburden their translators, so they kind of do like rush jobs sometimes, or they're not like really.
Translators are paid very little.
Probably that too. Yeah.
Subtitlers, like my friend Jiyoon, Jiyoon. Her name's not Jiyoon. She does translations for videos and pays very little, from what I understand. Which isn't surprising. Everything pays very little.
Is that right?
Even my foundation, it doesn't pay people.
Okay, so where was I? Was I explaining?
I'm surprised to hear that about. Sorry, I was going to say I'm surprised to hear that about the translations.
I was surprised too, because I thought it nailed a lot of the stuff that I thought it was going for, but apparently it's like it's much more strong politically than the English translation makes it seem, I guess, is the basic gist of what I got from it.
When I was watching it, I did notice they changed some stuff, but I thought it was just more of just to make it flow better for the language they were translated into.
Yeah, like I heard some people complaining that like, so all right, God, this is going to be interesting to anybody. Like when a character calls someone like hyung, like that's what, if you're younger and you're speaking to an older male, like that's basically what you call the person. It's like a title. It's like older brother. But when it's translated, they just put the person's like name, like translated into English. So like, God, I can't remember his.
I completely understood that though, why they would do that.
Yeah, me too. Because most people don't understand what the fuck hyung means. Like they'll be confused. Like, is that his name? Like, why is he calling 3 people that? That's not their name. So I don't know that part. I don't think is valid as a complaint. But anyway, let's turn to this. This series of comments and questions about Korean culture generally, all sort of through the lens of having watched and discussed and listened to people talk about Squid Game. But I think we're gonna it's
lead the conversation, Oppa. Oppa.
Oh, you are. That's also not what you would call me. Are you my girl? You're my girlfriend? No, you're older than me.
Oh right, I'm a month older than you. God damn it! Why don't you call me Hyung?
Okay, Hyung.
Thank you.
Opa. Let's just read what this fellow joshuaism had to say, and then we'll go from there. Or we'll kind of stop along the way. Okay, I feel weird reading like a compliment, but great episode, guys, and thanks for the shout out. Not to turn you guys into a Korean pop culture commentary podcast, but if you do return to discuss Squid Game again, per your comment there, were some aspects of the show's story that I'd be interested in learning more about. Personally, a lot of my questions regarding Korea are influenced by my experience living in Japan and with Japanese pop culture. For a while, Japanese cultural exports seemed to dominate American subcultures, anime and gaming mostly. But in the last decade, South Korean dramas and K-pop have seemed to make some inroads, and I kind of wondered why that has been the case, and whether or not those changes are mostly cultural or purely economic.
Calculated. Those changes are so calculated by the Korean government.
Indeed. It's very much manufactured intentionally, and I did a little digging on like how much money the government actually puts towards
soft culture.
Yeah,
soft power. Sorry, that's what I was wanting to say. Soft power.
Yeah, I don't. Well, I was gonna say Hallyu, which is the Korean word for like the Korean wave, like the Korean fad, the Korean style, taking like branching out around the world. It's called Hallyu. So I couldn't quite find any like recent numbers from this year, maybe just because the year isn't finished yet. But at least in 2020, I got a few numbers about how much money they spend, and then how much money they profit by in turn. So the Korean government sets aside like huge amounts of money to prop up and push. I guess the biggest things would be K-pop and like the television shows. I guess mostly dramas, but now like you've got some stuff like Squid Game, which I guess you could call that drama, but nah, it's not really.
See, like Squid Games to me, and I really should have looked this up. I know it was made in Korea. It was made by Korean Netflix, but like, didn't Netflix like produce it? Like, which makes it a bit different because it's not on like Korean TV, and the stuff that's been on Netflix that wasn't on Korean TV has actually been pretty interesting as far as K-dramas go.
Yeah, I'm sure there's a more like there's probably more of a sort of international production behind it. But I know what you're saying. It seems more appealing towards an international audience somehow. I can't quite put my finger on what it is exactly, but I know what you mean, just about the general feeling of the show. But in any case, they're spending like hundreds of billions of dollars. Just I can't find any like lumped together totals because this article is actually breaking it up into like all the different segments of the Korean wave. So it's saying that, for example, they spent in 2020 75 billion won on augmented reality and virtual reality content. And then also like, they're like researching and doing development on like other, the kind of high tech shit. But
it's actually some of the type of government spending I approve of in a weird way. It's like government spending going towards arts.
Yeah, I guess I don't really know like specifically where it's going. I imagine a lot of the money goes directly to record companies and like these broad like talent entertainment companies. I mean, I think a lot of people are fairly aware of like how intensely these K-pop artists like basically train from like a fairly young age. So like they're like literal like like kind of like K-pop star boot camps, and I think a lot of people can't cut it too. It's like physically demanding, and you also have to just like you either have to get a
mentally demanding
shit ton of plastic surgery or just be like
plastic
lucky.
Surgery's out of style. They don't do that as much anymore. That's kind of like old wave. Promise you on this.
I'm just saying like plastic surgery still is like a huge industry in this country. One fucked up thing I remember seeing was a picture from like the lobby of a plastic surgery, whatever, hospital, clinic. And they had in this like transparent like case, I guess, like just this kind of this like cylinder that like went up from the floor to the ceiling, was full of, you're like, what the fuck is that? And you realize it's like, well, you don't realize until you read like the caption or whatever, but they saved the part of people's jaws that they had shaved off from the jawbone, because that's like a really popular surgery to like narrow your face. And it was like hundreds of these like shaved jaw pieces on display. It was fucking disturbing. And that I read up on it, and like somebody like caught wind of that, and like they were like forced to remove it, or I don't know. I mean,
Yeah.
it's
No, what I
pretty
was saying
perverse.
with the plastic surgery in South Korea, I want to say it's more of a millennial and Gen X and Boomer thing. That the Gen Z crowd, those people younger than us, from talking to like Yane, who knows a lot about the beauty industry, is like it's like they don't like it. It's like out of style for young people, and even like the younger K-pop artists and actors generally don't have it as much anymore because like fans are averse to it. At least noticeable plastic surgeries like the jaw thing and the eye thing and the I don't know.
The eye thing is still really common just amongst like civilians, like so many women, like more. I remember seeing the numbers on it at least years ago, and it was like strong, like majority of women like had gotten that eyelid surgery. In any case, also I just a few other like numbers I found and trends were that like the amount of money being spent since actually weirdly coincidentally the year that you and I both arrived in Korea. So like 2009, 2010,
1983,
2011, they spent about I guess that would be $1 million or $2 million a year on pushing like this culture,
soft power,
soft power, cultural advancement. But then to 2012, it leaps up hugely to $257.5 million from $1 million, and then just
they got that breakout star.
Just keeps going up every year after that. I would say it's a combination of, I mean, it's definitely an intentional like government scheme in a way. But it's also, but also people, it's just stuff that people genuinely like as well. I'm not trying to, because I'm not going to say like, oh, like people are just being like force fed this stuff and that's why they like it. Like, no, I think like they're like actually like passionate. There's a certain amount of real artistic value, even though when you maybe look at a K-pop video, it seems pretty vapid sometimes, but like, I don't know. At least, I mean,
there's a lot of talent that goes into it.
Yeah.
Even if it does seem vapid, I mean, there's a lot of talent in that industry. I know Japan has actually pulled back on how much they like export their music and entertainment. That's the word I'm looking for. Like it's not as big of a priority these days.
Yeah, and like,
or I think that's true.
And like our listener said, like a lot of the stuff that was picked up on an international level from Japan were more niche things like anime and gaming and like manga and stuff. I mean, in a huge way. Like those things make shit tons of money, of course. But
gaming's like the biggest industry ever, right? Entertainment industry, I mean.
Yeah, I think in terms of money, yeah. But it does seem like a different phenomenon in a way. The way I guess like Squid Game has caught on really quickly, but I also wonder if it might just be like one of those things that like got a lot of like word of mouth, and then like people will forget about it in a year or. So in this first article, there's also some stuff about South Korean culture making its way into North Korea, but I want to save that for a little down the line when we address specific North Korean questions here. But so let's jump ahead to the next thing. He goes on to say, some topics that appear in Squid Game that might be of interest to foreigners like myself might include, and here we go, divorce and family law. So the main character, Sung Gi-hyun, player 456, has a daughter from a previous marriage and appears to maintain contact with her. How typical is this arrangement? I ask because in Japan there is no concept of joint custody, nor visitation rights after a divorce. Is Japan an outlier amongst East Asian nations, or is it Korea? Well, I don't know if I can answer the last question really, because I don't know what things are like in other East Asian countries, but I can say that it's different from Japan if what they're saying here is correct. Like no concept of joint custody or visitation. So what I found about that, first of all, just regarding divorce generally, I think at this point in Korea, from what I can tell, it's not nearly as prevalent as it is in like Western countries. That's for sure. Like,
yeah, that's definitely true.
But I was looking up like the legal grounds for divorce, and they all line up basically with what there would be like in the US, I think. So it's like, I'll just go through it quickly, like adultery, just malicious desertion, just extremely maltreating the spouse or his or her lineal ascendants.
Number 5 is weird.
Oh, yeah. It also says if a spouse's lineal ascendant has maltreated the spouse.
Oh, no, that's actually a big thing. Like overbearing Korean moms not liking the wife of their son and like letting it be known in very mean ways.
That makes sense. Yeah, number 5, the death or life of the other spouse has been unknown for 3 years.
That's not a divorce, is it? You're just a widow.
Well, it's saying it's unknown.
A widower.
So it's if they like go missing.
Oh, okay.
Like it'd be that kind of thing of like missing but presumed dead, maybe, or I don't know.
Yeah, I get it.
It's just like they leave one day and never call or come back. I mean, it is still kind of bizarre, but it also makes sense because I don't know. I guess I can see how. Well, yeah, if you wanted to remarry or something, right? So you'd have to legally get divorced, and yeah, 6 is just like etc. Like any other things that are like seriously wrong within the marriage. But yeah, it's much less common. But as far as child custody goes, it is pretty. I think it's pretty accurately portrayed in the show as well. And it's also, as far as I know, I think basically the same in the United States, where more often than not, the mother is going to get custody in a divorce. But
that's what I've read too.
But there is shared custody. Visitation rights, 2 weekends per month, 3 or 4 days for each summer and winter vacation.
Just what my dad had when I was growing up.
Every other weekend.
Every other weekend.
Yeah. So yeah, that seems pretty similar. But yeah, I mean, like it's really uncommon.
Yeah, I know that divorce rates have went up in Korea, but they're not like the same as America by any means.
No, it's like
I think they've went down in America.
It's like 50% in the U.S., isn't it?
Yeah, something like that.
So another subject gets brought up is gambling, which I'll just continue reading here. Player 456 also seems to be an avid horse race gambler, and I'm curious how popular horse racing and other gambling is in Korea. I understand Korea.
Dude, I just want to interrupt here. I've had so much fun every time I've been to the horse track in Seoul. I used to go a lot when I was a Daichi teacher because my old friends who worked at the Academy Ducks, we would all go on Saturday and Sunday and gamble away our paychecks at the horse races. Did it like full summer, the summer of horse races. It was funny because I would bet on these horses just based on their names because I knew fucking jack shit about horses or horse racing. But I was like, yeah, that's a cool name.
I feel like that's what a lot of people do, but maybe not. I mean, that's what
I
that's what
remember
it
one-
seems like in like TV and movies, at least.
One of the horses was named Bitcoin Destroyer. It was my favorite horse.
It's not a bad name. I understand Korea has similar gambling laws to Japan, so I wonder whether that's a holdover from Japanese colonization. And I'd like to know how gambling is treated in Korean media and as a social problem in general. So, good questions. Because there's a strange relationship to gambling in this country, I think. Got an article here.
It's illegal.
Well,
But
except
it's not illegal.
with exceptions. So, like, generally casinos, and there are 23 casinos in the whole country. Korean citizens cannot set foot into those casinos. If they do and
It's
are caught,
really-
they can get into like serious trouble. However,
It's really weird. I wanted to go to the casino with Korean friends, and we couldn't. Made me sad.
well, you should have just gone east a bit into Gangwon-do, which is where there is one special casino that allows Korean citizens to come in and gamble. It's called, it's just called Gangwon Casino.
My next vacation with Yane.
So Gangwon is like the big sort of mountainous, not a lot of real cities province of Korea, and this casino is out that way, and it's basically like inside of like a little ski resort. So it's not like it's kind of purposely put out in the boonies, so to speak. I guess it's still, I mean, the logic,
That's a really nice area.
the logic eludes me, honestly, though. But horse racing and let's see, what are the other forms of gambling that are allowed? So you can do lotteries, horse racing, boat racing, and cycling are all forms of gambling.
I went and rode my bicycle in the velodrome in Korea. It was super fun.
The what?
If anyone betted on me, a velodrome, like one of those like bicycle race tracks with a real slant. You go real fast around this circle.
Oh, okay.
It's like a racetrack for bicycles. There's like a really nice velodrome in Seoul, and I was in a race.
Is it made for,
And if anyone,
for gambling?
it's made for bike races, and people do bet on them. I'm sure no one betted on me because they're not that good.
You should have called yourself Bitcoin Destroyer.
Should have.
So also online gambling is very strictly prohibited, just like it is in the U.S. I think on the federal level, I believe.
Yeah, but I was going to say both in the U.S. and Korea, people find ways around it.
Oh yeah, I'm sure. I mean, even in this article, yeah, it mentions like people just using like VPNs to avoid the government.
Like online poker is a big thing with certain people.
Yeah, I'm sure there's plenty of online gambling here. An interesting thing though is that according to a study by the Korean Center on Gambling Problems, I just find it funny that exists, but the average Korean is 2 to 3 times more likely to suffer from gambling addiction than any other nationality. I gotta question the objectivity.
They love to take risk here.
But the objectivity of the Korean Center on Gambling Problems when they make that assertion, I imagine they're trying. They're starting with their conclusion.
It's like the American Alcoholic Anonymous say that Americans are 2 or 3 more times likely to become alcoholics than other nationalities.
Yeah,
they don't say that.
They don't, but yeah, it would be like that, I think.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I think what I find like maybe the strangest about the prohibition on Koreans being able to gamble here is that, like, when I first heard about that law, my thought was like, oh well, they're like protecting the citizens and then bilking the tourists. You know what I mean? But it's like, if it was just about making money, you'd think they would open it up to everybody. But I think it really is probably just this like misplaced sense of morality or something. I don't know.
I think it's both misplaced sense of morality, and I also think, this is conjecture. Sorry, we're getting in conjecture territory here, maybe even conspiracy territory. I think there's just a lot of like behind the scenes gambling going on where people actually get in trouble with it.
Yeah, I'm sure.
And maybe there's money tied up in that and people tied up in that who don't want it to be, legal.
Yeah, that could very well be true. And I mean, that's going to tie into some...
Those same people don't want porn to be legal in this country. But,
well, you know what I heard about?
Anyway.
What I heard about that, which is weird. Maybe it's not true, but I feel like someone just told me this, maybe when I first moved to Korea. But they were like, yeah, the government like completely censors like pornography on the internet, and it all started when some like girl was like kidnapped and assaulted, and it was like porn was blamed somehow. It's weird. It's just weird. I don't know. Because also, again, just like the gambling thing, they're not really stopping anybody.
I mean, it almost represses a society and makes people resort to things like creating the ninth room where lots of girls get abducted. But, have a thriving prostitution market. Also illegal, but very thriving for very many reasons here because the...
But that's
what is
that's
it?
Not, that's not because porn is outlawed. Like it's not hard to get around.
No, but I guess what I'm trying to say is, it's that whole like sexual repression thing. I think there was also in America in like the 50s where like if sex is like really repressed in culture and media, then like it's more like the darker aspects are more prevalent in society or some bullshit. I don't know.
I mean, it's possible it works that way. I'm just thinking of counter examples, like the United States itself is full of sickos and like plenty of prostitution, like as an industry.
So it's everywhere.
Yeah, I think it's everywhere, and that's my point. Is I think them making this like vain attempt to like stop sex crimes by like feebly blocking like porn sites, like feudally blocking porn sites. It all just strikes me as like, again, like with the gambling ban, like very pointless and only probably creates more problems. It's just like for the same, it's really the same reasons that, I would always argue against prohibiting drugs. Like people are going to do them, and
and you're just making them less safe.
Making them illegal just creates a black market, which creates murders and all kinds of other shit that like wouldn't happen otherwise. And I think it's probably the same with these other like vices, these industries of vice, But I mean, with the porn thing, like they're just not stopping anything. Like it seems like they almost did it as a way to like appease like some like hyper religious community or something that has like enough of a voice.
Churches here have a lot of lobbying power. Well, I guess they do everywhere, but there's just a lot of money wrapped up in the churches here.
Yeah. Another topic that we're going to touch on in a minute here, I think. So that's gambling. I think that they have an interesting idea about, except I don't know what the gambling laws are in Japan. I guess I'm going to assume they're similar to Korea.
I feel like Japanese people are allowed to openly gamble.
Yeah, I just don't know. I guess I should have looked into that. I looked into a lot of shit today.
Like Korea was a lot more strict on it than Japan.
Well, they're like what they're saying is, well, is there like a Japanese influence on Korea's attitude towards gambling? The reason I can't answer the question is I just don't know what the Japanese attitude is.
My real quick hit here is most forms of gambling in Japan are generally banned by the criminal code. But there's a lot of exceptions, including horse racing and certain motorsports.
This sounds
And
very
Korea
similar.
Korea used to have a big motorsports scene with like F1 racing, but I think it's kind of died out. Because I remember my first year here that was big, but I haven't heard about it in a long time for some reason. So yeah, I guess they are similar. As far as what kind of influence they've had on each other, I think Korea and Japan often influence each other a lot, and both countries would, commit seppuku before admitting that.
Yeah, it's true. Next subject is very related to gambling. It's debt. Dear listener goes on to write, so most of the players in the game seem to have money issues that drove them to participate in the game, and we saw player 456 chased by loan sharks in the first episode. Are the debt collection tactics in the show common in Korean media, or are they even realistic? I know in Japan it's near impossible to escape advertisements and signage for gray market sarikin loan companies, and Japanese movies and dramas would suggest that less reputable ones resort to violence or push women into the mizu shobai. I'm guessing that's some sort of prostitution.
Yep.
But the Japanese are also known for their high household savings rate and relatively low credit card debt. Of course, Americans hold debt of all kinds, student loans, payday loans, credit card debt, and have practically no savings. What is the Korean relation to household and personal debt?
Before we get into your articles, it's my understanding that Koreans have a ton of credit card debt. And it's also my understanding that Koreans are very good at saving money, which has always confused me. But I hear there is a ton of debt here, like especially with like car loans and other things, because you always see people. You see people with things that you know are very, very expensive, and it makes no sense to you how they could possibly have all those things, especially when you know them personally and you're like, but you do this as a job. And it's like, yeah, I think a lot of people are in debt here. Am I right?
Yeah. Household debt posing major threat to Korean economy amid pandemic. So, yeah, there's a huge amount of debt. Like it's gone up about, let's see, this is trillions of won. So we'll say that's billions of dollars.
Billions, right.
So it's gone up, it looks like almost like $500 million, yeah, every year since 2017. Well, maybe, anyway, there's a lot, and it's a problem, and it all gets tied into...
So I think a lot of it's tied into why people go in debt here is Korea is a very much keeping up with the Joneses sort of country, where everyone feels a lot of social pressure to like stay on trend, and a lot of trends involve a lot of money. People spend their money to keep up with the other Joneses.
Yeah.
In case of Korea, keep up with the Kims.
And there are a lot of like predatory loans, basically ability to get what I would call predatory loans, which ties into the idea of
what I would call title loans,
going to loan sharks. But there's some attempt by the government to reduce like the loan shark problem. The government cut the maximum legal lending rate to 20% last year, and that was all as a way of easing financial burdens for debtors, basically, because
20% is still so much interest.
Yeah, it is.
Though I think some American credit cards are like 30% interest. Could be wrong about that. And then title loans in America, my family issues, but with my mom and some other people got in trouble with title loans, and they would often have like a 50% interest, and it just like snowballs so quickly out of control. You haven't lived until you get to bail family members out of title loans. But yeah, I imagine there's similar things here. It's good that they reduced it to 20%, because I don't think they've done it in the States yet, and there was like a push for it at one point.
So like the state of things before they dropped this percentage from the article here says that the FSC, I'm guessing that's some sort of financial regulation, something or another, estimated that as a result, some 316,000 borrowers would not be able to borrow from either the first or second tier banks, with 39,000 of them likely resorting to illegal loan sharks. So I do think there's a fair amount of people, just like portrayed in Squid Game, getting themselves into deep shit with the mob, essentially, to borrow money.
To answer one more part of this question, loan sharks are a big part of Korean entertainment. It's in a lot of dramas and movies also, much like Japanese movies.
And I guess the question about like loan sharks, resorting to violence in real life, we can get some sense of that through the next part here. Actually, there's an example of that. So there's this guy, Jung Jin, and he used to borrow money from loan sharks, peddling his organs to get much needed funds for his upstart drug maker. Now he's the second richest person in South Korea, trailing Samsung Electronics chairman. So there's this guy who, I forget what his company even is. Yeah, he's in like pharmaceuticals now. But he somehow had some sort of like rags to riches, I guess, story that involved.
It's not a chaebol.
Yeah, I guess not. I'm not actually sure. I didn't really look deep into his history, but
no,
the main reason
he's not. The article says so.
Okay.
The main reason what?
Oh, just because it's a real life example of someone like basically putting their like organs down for collateral to like borrow money and stuff. That answers a question that's coming down the line, I'm pretty sure, about like sort of rags to riches narratives in Korea. If I'm remembering right, a lot of information here. So next, he asks about organized crime. So how prevalent is it, and what businesses does it involve itself in or avoid? Is it like the Yakuza or Mafia? Is there much Korean media that glamorizes organized crime, like The Godfather or Goodfellas in the West, or like the Yakuza game series in Japan? Do they all have face tattoos? I don't know about face tattoos, but the tattoo element is definitely kind of a giveaway from what I've come to understand, at least about certain segments of the organized crime world.
There's organized crime, and I know very little about it, or how it works in Korea.
Well, I think it works basically the same as everywhere. I mean,
prostitution, meth, I think those are two of the big industries with organized crime in Korea.
Yeah, prostitution definitely is usually backed by I guess we could just call them the mafia. I guess so. Some of the earliest like forms of organized crime came out of the colonial era, because basically a lot of Koreans were trying as they might to revolt against the Japanese overlords, and so like one of the earliest like forms of organized crime was started up by this Korean guy here, Kim Do-han, and
yeah, he started like the Myeongdong gang, right? Or the Dongdaemun one. Dongdaemun game, yeah. Syngman Rhee and the Liberal Party, they used Kim Do-han to recruit gangsters in order to silence and suppress their political opponents.
That would have been like after the Japanese were banished.
Yeah.
So, but like before that, like he started a gang, or joined a gang. Yes. called Fist, and but my point about this is that this group was formed for the purpose of fighting against the Yakuza, which was present.
They were even used for like propaganda. I'm going a bit off the book here, the book being your notes, but I've looked at some other stuff. They used his gang, like the government in Korea used his gang to make like pro-liberal party and anti-communist films. Like these the Dongdaemun gang, this like organized crime gang, was almost like they were turned into heroes because of their fight against the Yakuza and communists. But they also suppressed a lot of protesters and activists who wanted, better things for young people. They were like notorious for political terrorist attacks. They caused the National Assembly audience rights for constitutional reform intervention in 1954. They interrupted the Liberal Party's founding party in 1955. And all of the attacks they did were basically to silence protesters that were against the corrupt regime, like the dictatorship that was going on in South Korea at the time.
Right.
So they were kind of just another arm of the government.
Yeah, so like right from the get-go, the corrupt government and the mafia were intertwined, and I imagine still are. Would it go out on a limb and say?
Yeah, I know that like this is from just like personal interest, but I know like the most famous like recent Korean gangster who was arrested in 2010 was Lee Kang-han. And he was arrested for extorting like 400 million won from construction businesses. I think he was wrapped up with 2MB to some degree.
The former president of the country, yes.
Yeah, 2MB. He's called 2MB because it's the size of his brain. 2 megabytes.
It's a good play on words.
I'm laughing at that. I love that Korean joke. I lost.
So in terms of
that gang was the Seven Stars gang, right? The biggest gang in Korea, I guess modern Korea, was the Seven Stars gang. That's what I was trying to say, and it was led by Lee Kang-han.
Now, my feeling about you might actually have more. You probably do have more experience with the Korean media. So, but my experience with it, I wouldn't say I've ever seen the mafia glamorized like the way that it is in, say, like, I mean, okay, Goodfellas, it's like glamorized but not. It's kind of like idiots think that like we're supposed to be like rooting for, I don't know, De Niro or whatever in that movie. But
yeah,
like I mean, on the level of reality, like Scorsese's not making like a pro mafia film. It's just anyway. I get the spirit of the question. So I haven't seen anything where I felt like the mafia was glamorized. I've only seen them like cartoonishly vilified. Not necessarily cartoonishly, but just like there's not usually like any sort of like complexity to like the bad guy mafia characters I've seen in the movies. Like usually they're just like pure evil criminal guy, the end. But I don't know, maybe you like what about that show you were telling me about, the Vincenzo? You said
I was going to say
that's like a comedy, right?
There's Vincent Cho, which I love, and they definitely glorize the mafia, but they glorize the Italian mafia in the show. Because he's an Italian Korean. No, I mean, there's like gangster movies in Korea.
Yeah, but
which I've seen some where like, you know, there's like maybe a gangster good guy trying to leave the gang or whatever. But no, I don't think like it's usually glorified here. I think there's more of like just like gritty cop movies usually where the cops are basically doing gang shit.
Yeah, like the last
last
movie I saw probably with like heavily filled with gangsters was a man from nowhere.
Ajashi.
Yes, Ajashi in Korean. With the handsomest man in Korea.
Handsome, I've always thought I looked exactly like him, but a lot of people disagree with me. Old Boy was a mafia movie to some degree.
I don't think they're made to look good in any way.
Did you see the movie New World? It was like, it kind of glorified the Korean gangs to some degree.
No, I haven't seen that.
It's like a big like Korean gangster movie, I think from like 2015 or 14.
Maybe I
don't know. I mean, Korea.
I mean, there's a lot of Korean cinema. Just the popular films like you said, Old Boy, for example. Like that's a movie everybody knows. Like those are maybe good examples. Like it's not that they're because those movies like Park Chan-wook's movies are like have like anti-heroes and stuff. Like they're always like doing like, you know, nasty revenge shit, but it's not glamorizing like, hey, this is the life of being a criminal, isn't it grand? Like it's much more dark than that usually, I feel like. But like I said, I think you've consumed more Korean media, especially TV, than I have. So speaking of the mafia, Christianity.
Did you know Korea is the home of the biggest Protestant church in the world?
Did know that. Has 1 million+ members.
My dad, who's never going to visit Korea, but he used to say that he might. That was the main thing he wanted to see.
That was my parents visited me once, and they for sure went to that church.
Did they take you?
No. I wasn't going to go.
Man, you're not I see, I feel guilty. I would just go.
No, that didn't happen. So back to the comments here. The one Christian player in Squid Game comes off as a pretty awful person, and another player is shown to have a very specific antipathy towards Christianity for reasons revealed in episode 6. Yet a glowing cross seems to be intentionally framed into the scene when player 456 is freed at the end of the game. Spoiler alert. I guess I should have said that earlier, but whatever. I was surprised to find out how irreligious South Korea is compared to the Japanese. How do most Koreans feel about Christianity and Christians? I guess I don't know how religious Christian Japan is, but
I thought Japan was the most atheist country on the planet, but I guess I'm wrong.
No, I mean that's probably like Iceland or something. Like the Scandinavian countries are very atheistic, but no, I mean I thought Japan and Korea, I would have guessed they're about the same when it comes to Christianity. But I
always thought Korea was way more Christianity oriented.
To try to bring some facts into here, the percentage of people in Korea that profess to be Christian is, where did it go? I want to say 26%, but I want to make sure 29%. That
COVID made Christianity a lot less popular.
Huh?
COVID made Christianity a lot less popular with Koreans because of the problems with the churches spreading coronavirus willy-nilly.
Oh yeah, they're at the heart of that for sure. I mean, I think maybe it's probably obvious to say, but like Christianity basically like was like forcibly planted here by missionaries like after the chaos of the war, more or less, because it definitely wasn't happening during colonial times.
Weird. Missionaries did that in Japan too after the chaos of the war.
Yeah, that's when they're vulnerable. Get them then.
That's when the vultures come in.
Still, 29% is really not that high. Like, I mean, America like professes to be like 90+% Christian, even though I think a lot of that is just people.
Really?
Something like that, yeah.
Jesus, that's way more than I'd expect.
America is super,
I mean, I believe it.
Super Christian, man.
America's fucking weird.
America is like the most religious country on earth. For sure. Well, maybe okay. Maybe I'm mixing up how many people that believe in God with being Christian. I mean, I could be looking at these numbers right now, and I'm just not. But I would say that my sort of anecdotal experience would be I haven't met very many Christian people in Korea, but the ones I have met are like very serious about it, very devout.
Yeah, the true believers.
Yeah, like there's not
Same.
There's not really like casual Christians, or like, what do you call it, cafeteria Catholics or whatever. Although also I think like Protestantism is the most prevalent here.
Yeah, and Korea does have the one really like weird branch off cult of Christianity, the Shincheonji.
Yeah, that's where COVID got its first spike from. Was from like
They've done so much weird shit.
there's also
in this
the other, there's like multiple weird like spin-off cults.
Shincheonji is the biggest one.
Well, there's Sun Myung Moon, who he claimed to be like a messiah. Like he's basically like he founded like a whole brand new branch of Christianity called the Unification Movement. A lot of bad entanglements with that guy, and he started that shit back in like right after the war as well. And his whole like he was using the church to push like anti-communist propaganda rhetoric, and he was also basically just like a big businessman. Yeah, he was part of he was in like the Chaebol family, something called the Tongil group. Anyway, I would say like Christianity here is basically used the same way that it is in America to some extent. Like I just was citing this example of this like con man, Sun Moon, that could be his name, Sun Myung Moon. But yeah, the biggest difference I would say is that like the Christians here actually are pretty devout. It's not really like, it's not so much a like social thing, or I mean, I guess it's bleeding more into politics more these days. But like basically, the country just doesn't take religion as seriously as a country like the U.S. does. Like I know I can say that based on just on conversations I've had with people, because I always get like sort of uncomfortable if like a coworker or something starts talking to me about God or religion, because I don't want to like get into a fucking argument. And I also don't.
Same.
And I also don't want to hear them like drone on about Jesus and stuff. But like what I found is that like no one. I shouldn't say. Okay, there are people that stand on the street waving signs, you know, saying you're going to go to hell unless you believe in Jesus. That does happen. It's pretty rare, but like
a lot of them during the gay pride parade.
Yeah. That's kind of when they come out a lot, is for stuff like that. But they're just, it's a minority. Like I said, it's 29%, and probably half of that is even like, you know, sort of like politically active with their religiosity or like trying to evangelize. But that's just my general sort of taking the temperature of the country with my personal experience more than anything. Yeah, religion just, you can feel that it's just less important here, I guess. That's just that compared to America, where people are so oftentimes just really just zealous in their belief, like in my experience at least. But we'll see. Maybe Korea, as it becomes more and more like America, will become more and more unhinged and evangelical and religious. All right, so next, intergenerational conflict or lack thereof. Of course, most of the cast in Squid Game looked to be Gen X or millennial or Xillennial, with the only Gen Z characters having unique circumstances. So there wasn't much opportunity for intergenerational conflict. But does Korea have a boomer problem like we do in the US?
Yes.
Do they even group populations by generation like we do in the US? And if so, do their generations align with ours in birth years and generalized stereotypes? Great questions. Yeah, there is. I mean, what do you want to say about the boomer problem? How would you characterize that?
I mean, it's the same as the States. Like old people here have a lot of money, or they bought a lot of property when it was still cheap, and there's not much money for young people, and it's causing like a lot of problems with young people right now, because like, you know, you're supposed to work for this certain amount of success, and it's becoming harder and harder to do so in Korea, and it's near impossible to own anything now because of limited space, etc.
Yeah, I mean, people are facing, I mean, down the same generational lines as in the U.S. are facing the same kind of problems or experiencing the same kind of like trends, like, you know, the
The great jobs don't happen anymore.
millennial generation like doesn't reproduce nearly as much as older generations. Not same with marriage, same with like owning a house, having a steady job with decent pay. All of the same things, really. It does mirror pretty well with the U.S.
Something that's brought up in the show and is actually brought up in Korea a lot. The reason they like Gi-hun's friend, the one that went to SNU, the reason they hammer that so much is like SNU, much like Harvard, is like a near like guarantee that you will get to be in one of those upper crust jobs. So getting there is like a regular person who's not part of like a rich family or whatever. That means that you're going to get to transcend your cultural bounds most likely. That's why Korean parents push on their kids so hard to get into Sky universities. But even that's becoming less and less true, though it helps. Much like going to an Ivy League probably helps people get a leg up as far as advantages.
So as far as like what generations are called in Korea, I do have some information on that I didn't know before. But this article here at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace website. South Korean society can be divided into 4 major demographic groups, which do not correspond precisely to the baby boomer and millennial labels common in the United States. South Koreans can be grouped into 4 political generations who have spent their formative years in vastly different socio-political conditions. First is the country's rapidly rising elderly population, which includes the generation that came of age during the Korean War and the post-war baby boomers. So these are people who are in their 60s or older. Next is the in-between generation known as the democratization generation.
Oh, they're the 386.
Yes, known in South Korea as 386 generation, who were born in the 1960s and gained notoriety for their activism during the country's democratization in the 1980s. They are now in their 50s. Third is the first post-democratization generation, known as Generation X. Hey! But this is more like millennials, right? Yeah. But they're called Generation X. No, not millennials.
No, there would be Gen Xers almost.
Okay, they're still just... Yeah, the lines aren't perfect with... I mean, these things are...
They're not perfect in the States either. It's weird.
That's what I was just going to say. Is like these things are all just sort of like... have weird blurry borders anyway, but there's Generation X, they're in their 40s. Then there's the new generation, people in their 20s and 30s, composed of 2 subgroups, older millennials and younger Generation Z. So they're not even really making a distinction between millennials and Zoomers the way that we tend to. The younger South Koreans in their 20s and 30s grew up in an affluent South Korean society but face growing economic angst despite their potential to drive technological innovation. Sounds like this writer is not going to take any millennial whining. Just drive technology forward, damn it.
Problem is, they do that. You know, I know Americans that do that too, but somehow the money just gets funneled up to like other people.
It's amazing how that happens. It's like a magic trick.
It's weird.
Okay. They had a question about like economic mobility in Korea.
Hard. Near impossible to change your stars. Can't do it. Get into a Sky University. You're not going to. It's like getting into Harvard. You just don't, unless you know the right people. Sorry. I don't know why I'm sorry, but
He had a
go ahead with what he said.
He had a question about was the neighborhood, like the false staged neighborhood during the marble playing sequence, was that neighborhood depicted there ever typical among Koreans? Definitely yes.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like I still see neighborhoods like that.
Yeah, and you can even go to like really nice ones, like the one they have in Andong, the Hamok village. But yeah, they're still around there. Your neighborhood's not that far off from it, or our neighborhood in certain ways.
Yeah.
A lot
Yeah.
more hilly.
We get more hills. And then, oh, yes, this is where the question about the rags to riches sort of mythology, does that exist in Korea as well? I would say, yeah, like the example we talked about, the guy who's the second richest person in Korea now was this, I guess, essentially rags to riches. I should have looked a little harder into him, but I think that myth is prevalent in, I mean, it would almost have to be in a hyper capitalistic society. Like everyone thinks, it's that classic quote, right? Like every American sees themselves as a potential millionaire or whatever.
And every parent in Korea sees themselves as a potential mom or dad of a Seoul National University student.
But then I would also say, like, the whole chaebol system is like based on just passing, keeping wealth concentrated in a small,
But their influence is waning lately. Like the chaebol industries like Doosan and Samsung and other places, their like profits are going down, and like there's new breakout industries like, or groups like Kakao and other things that are kind of like actually changing up the landscape, kind of like the .com people in America about 20 years ago were doing. But yeah, so chaebols are like royalty here. They started out as 27, but there's only like 12 that are actually really active anymore or powerful.
Yeah, I actually thought there were even less than 12 until we talked about it before. But yeah, I'm not surprised. I mean, that's kind of the way that these things go, right? It's just more and more concentrated. It's like how people used to say, man, can you believe there's only like 6 media companies that control everything in America? And now it's like 3. And that was only like 10 years ago. So in another, 5 years, they'll literally just be the one. Okay. But about economic mobility, I mean, I did find some very, very exciting graphs and numbers, but basically to cut through all of it, South Korea is ranked 25th in terms of social mobility, which...
Is that higher than America or lower?
I don't remember, actually. I think it's lower. I think it's...
that's sad.
I can't remember, actually.
I was hoping they were more mobile than us, mainly just because I like to shit on America.
I mean, I can check.
The land of social mobility that I don't think is actually the land of social mobility at all. Did you know 15 billionaires on all of American media?
It seems like a lot. I would think it was even less. But no, I mean, that's still fucked. The U.S. is 27th. So yeah, slightly more mobile.
Nice. There is more mobility here. Once again, Korea does it better than America.
No, they're 29th. Didn't I? Wait, what?
I thought you said 25th.
Oh, did I?
Shit.
I fucking can't even remember.
I might have misheard you.
I might have misheard myself. I don't know. You're right. I didn't say 29th. 29 was another number from somewhere that was stuck in my mind. But so yeah, like I was saying though, like this isn't pure economic mobility. It's social mobility. Ranked 25th. The U.S. is 27th. I mean, it shows you. I would have just guessed that economic mobility is pretty similar in the U.S. and Korea, much like I feel like the problems that younger generations face are very similar in both countries. It's not to say that Korea is just like some like mini America. Like it does have definite benefits over the United States that we've probably talked about.
Their national health insurance plan is much better than anything America has.
Yeah, it's so much better than America's national health insurance plan. Oh wait, they don't have one. So in the way that the economic mobility is fairly stunted, economic inequality is also like just widening and widening, just like in the U.S. In Korea. That's just another thing to consider. North Korean defection. Is the defector's story realistically portrayed in Squid Game? I was under the impression defectors receive special social service priorities in the South and can often parlay their stories into minor celebrity statuses. But here she's just barely scraping by. Is the American left wrong about North Korean defectors? Are there so many defectors that her sob story and GoFundMe wouldn't even hit the nightly news? Also very good questions.
There's probably more North Korean defectors than you think.
I think that's
And
definitely, that is the case. I mean, I looked into that today, and
a lot of them live in a lot worse conditions than you would want them to. That's my understanding.
that being said, though, they're at least supposed to be. There's supposed to be this sort of government support for defectors, and
There are some programs and stuff. Like, I mean, there's a government-funded thing where North Koreans can take free English education classes, because I used to volunteer to lead some of those classes on weekends a long time ago, back when I wanted to do more fun stuff.
well, here's what the
volunteering.
Ministry of Unification lists as the benefits: 12 weeks of adaptation training, $6,000 to $32,400 in settlement benefits, which varies on the size of the household, $13,300 to $19,100 in housing subsidy, and fully free education in public schools and universities.
That seems like a lot.
That seems like a pretty decent way to like get started in an entirely like sort of strange new country. But what I suspect is that a lot of people fall through the cracks, and that even with this financial support, people may be ostracized because, you know, North Koreans speak with not a different dialect, but a very different accent that is like immediately noticeable. And some people are just fucking assholes here. Some people are just like in the movie, like the fucking gangster guy, right? He's like, "You stupid commie bitch," or whatever. So also in this same article, it talks about how there's a lack of like mental health support, and that like there's a 10% higher suicide rate in North Korean refugees or defectors than their South Korean counterparts. Or sorry, that's suicidal ideation, but still. And I guess it's just not uncommon for defectors to find it difficult to adjust to life in Korea. And I've also heard stories of people returning to North Korea. I don't know how common it really is. I mean, I even remember reading one story about a guy who supposedly like just walked through the DMZ to get back to North Korea because he hated South Korea that much.
I mean, I imagine the culture shock can be severe.
Yeah. The thing about being like turning themselves into like celebrities, that is the case, but it's like, you know, that's probably one out of every like 10,000 people.
It's like getting struck by lightning.
Yeah, it's still not. It's not like every defector gets picked up as a celebrity. I will say that this Park Hyun-mi, who's been like circulating the U.S. for a few years now, I guess
Yeah, I know.
she's a fucking idiot. I mean, she's just. I mean, I kind of get it. Like she's found like she's stumbled into an easy gig. But like the shit that she said on the Joe Rogan show is just. Did you hear that stuff, Jason?
I did not.
She is telling, and the best part is that Joe Rogan, because he's just got that like dumb stoned like affect, right? He's like, "Whoa, really?" She's like, "When we ride the subway, there's only one train car, and we all have to get out and push the train from the back to make it move." And she's talking about like seeing people like sitting on the sidewalk with their organs spilling out of their body, and the dogs are trying to eat their organs. Just like stuff that doesn't even make like physical like sense. Anyway, I just wanted to go off on that for a second. She's ridiculous, but she's an example of like one of these celebrity defectors that got big.
I think I saw her do a TED Talk once.
She did do a TED Talk, yeah.
I did not see her on Joe Rogan, but yeah, I think I saw her TED Talk a long time ago.
But she's like,
when TED Talks were cool.
I was reading up on her, and like she's changed her like story a lot and stuff. Like, I don't know.
She probably just realized she could milk it for profit.
I know,
but I'm so easier. I don't blame her.
Well,
but yeah, that's what you were saying.
Yeah, but it also doesn't help like to sort of calm tensions down between the two nations or anything. Like, it's just. It's very selfish. Anyway, the other thing is too that a lot of the people that can manage to escape are already rich. They're like people who live in Pyongyang, like totally different from people who live outside of the city. They have money. They're the ones who are getting like all of this like contraband of like South Korean like media like smuggled in from China, which is a big like black market in North Korea.
Yeah.
But like it's very rarely like, you know, I read a book about this guy who he was in a labor camp for like 10 years since he was a kid until he was like a young adult. He managed to escape the camp and the country, and it's like a harrowing story. But like I think a lot of the people who actually defect, you have to have money to do it, or you just have to get really lucky, like, you know, some of these other people. But because you just pay your way through, you just bribe people. You're like, oh, hey, guard, here's some money. Oh, hey, guy, hey, Chinese guy, here's some money. Because once they get out and into China, the Chinese government's policy is to return North Koreans to North Korea if they find them. And that happens a fair amount as well.
Yeah, and then, you know, a lot of defectors get to Korea, say they get to South Korea, and then, like, they just can't find a job because they're not, like, educated for the market.
Yeah. Or, like you said, like, this culture shock. I mean, part of what I was reading about the process once defectors arrive to South Korea. It says here that the government gives businesses incentives. It doesn't say what they are, but it says incentivizes businesses to employ North Korean defectors. I don't know. This article is from like the BBC, so it's got a very like sunny take on like the defector experience, I think, here.
It's hard. If you're a defector, I'm sure it's hard. You're differed. You're like treated differently. It's hard to integrate. You're probably not going to become famous. There are some social programs. It's also very possible that you don't sign up for them because you may not know how to sign up for them, etc.
Right.
And the job opportunities are usually sparse. Restaurant work, packaging work, construction work.
And another challenge too for defectors is there's a lot of different vocabulary because South Koreans have acquired like so many English words, like so many. I always kind of forget like how many there are until I think about it for a second. But more than that, like there are just like there are like simple words that are different between the two countries. Like even like the word for like Korea or Korean language or friend. These are all like different. And not that it would be like impossible to relearn those things, but that just gives a sense of like how out of place you would feel. Like you're speaking the common language, but you've got totally different names for like the country you live in. And for the war that was fought, that's, you know, split the country into. On a lighter note, it's kind of fun. It's kind of funny how, like things that like were introduced to Korea like fairly recently and therefore wouldn't have like an original Korean word. As example, okay, here's donut, which, you know, in South Korea it's just donut, but in North Korean parlance. They just like literally describe what a donut is, so it would break down into,
bong.
Huh?
Oh, I figured they just called it bong, you know, bread.
Well, circular bread.
Oh, okay.
Karakjibang.
That makes sense.
Circle bread. Okay. Yeah. So, I mean, this last bit is about migrant labor and like immigration, and a lot of what I know about immigration in this country is that you've got like basically two kind of separate worlds, I have to say, and you know, it's not right, it's not fair, but like Jason and I are in like the privileged immigrant side of things. We don't get abused necessarily. I mean, some people in positions like ours do get fucked over, but like once you get the hang of it,
Some of those people complain too much also.
well, right. I mean, I'm just saying, like, it's not everyone who comes over here to teach English is like given a crown and a fucking paycheck. Like, it's not necessarily like super easy and great, but compared to, say, I mean, it's just this is the reality is like migrant workers, usually from, you know, countries like Sri Lanka and the Philippines. They're the ones like, and the thing is like they're really hidden in a way. Like there are certain, I don't know, like there's certain parts of Seoul where that are sort of like have become like a, I don't know, generally foreigner like areas. But I know that these people like exist like on paper, but I don't really see them that often.
The biggest neighborhood for like Onsan is where I think most of the migrant workers end up living, which is not Seoul technically, but it is a suburb of Seoul.
Okay.
Because if you go through some of its neighborhoods, people are everywhere from different countries. Actually, they have some really great like streets for eating food that's not Korean or Western.
Well, right. I mean, like, so there's this area that we live kind of close to that if you go walking around the back streets of it, like that's where I've like gotten like most of the like working class sort of immigrant experience. And yeah, it's mostly like restaurant owners, but we're actually more talking about like the people who are doing like construction and like manual labor stuff, and like they're getting paid very, very little. Is that?
Yeah, I think a lot of those people end up in like cities like Onsan and Mokpo, and either port cities or more like industrial cities.
Yeah, I guess they're not in Seoul is the thing. Maybe yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's totally on the same level as the way the United States like puts immigrants into fucking meat factories and picking produce for like pennies on the dollar. It's my understanding that migrant labor is used the same way in Korea, not for necessarily those fields, but I've always been under the impression that it's more things like just like hard labor. Not that like working in a field isn't hard labor, but like construction work, basically. They're like cheap construction labor. And that's how a lot of these, these big fancy buildings get built. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay. I feel like we've been talking for like a year and a half. So thank you again to joshuaism. Yeah, I thought these were really interesting, thought-provoking questions and ideas to talk about, and I hope we did it justice. And yeah, really appreciate the feedback. So with that, we shall recommend some things and then get out of here. I will recommend a Korean movie called The Housemaid from 1960. It's an old movie. It's in black and white. It's basically, the premise is that a family is sort of a slowly torn apart by the introduction of a sort of femme fatale maid into the household. I thought it was really good, really interesting to watch a Korean film from that era, especially. It just I don't know, it reflected a lot of the times. And the director, Kim Ki-young, he's a really interesting character to to look at. Also, he lived through the war, obviously, and like he made all of these like what it says here are intensely psychosexual and melodramatic horror films, often focusing on the psychology of their female characters. I guess this film was KoreanFilm.org said there was a consensus that it was one of the top 3 Korean films of all time. And yeah, I mean, in a way, like it sounds like, oh, that kind of tired old story, like the evil woman who like somehow invades a household and just causes chaos. But I mean, this was 1960. I don't think that was like an established genre yet, But there is also, I should mention, a 2010 remake of this movie, which I'm actually just in the middle of right now. I just started watching it today, but I didn't have a chance to finish it. But it is starring the lead of Squid Game. Lee Jung-jae is the actor's name. The guy, he plays a player, 456? He's like a very, very popular, like sort of handsome leading man kind of guy, which you don't really necessarily see that throughout Squid Game, which is kind of funny. So like what I've seen of this remake of The Housemaid so far, it's really kind of funny to see him being like quite the exact opposite of the character from Squid Game, like in every way. Like he's rich and vain and doesn't seem to care much about anything. Sort of a Patrick Bateman-esque, actually, now that I think about it. But that's my recommendation. The Housemaid. And we'll say a half recommendation for the remake so far.
My recommendation is to be Patrick Bateman. Oh, no, sorry. Because I'm cultured and we talked about art recently. An artist that I really like right now is named Dasha Pleason. And their art is all just like this mold art they make with mold. And it's really beautiful to look at. And I just think it's cool to look at. And you should look at it.
With mold?
So Dasha,
like they grow mold?
Dasha Pleason. I sent you a link for it.
Okay.
Because I figured it might be hard for you to find.
Oh, cool.
But yeah, that I think their art is really cool. I don't know. Did you know we have a website, heatdeathpod.com? You can go there for all of your Heat Death related merchandise. There are Heat Death fonts, there are Heat Death words, there are Heat Death audio files, all for free. Words, we have words, all the words you could possibly want and more. Words, words, and words here at Heat Death Pod. We also have a Twitter, and we post our podcast on Reddit usually.
Every time. Yep. And
there's a Patreon too.
We have a Patreon. We still have it. We haven't taken it down. Yeah.
Never
like
will.
I say every week, I guess now, just trying to break even with that thing. So if you feel so inclined, it is available in the show notes. There's a link. That's it. Time to go.
Good game. GG.
All right. See you later.
See you.
The first voice recording was made in 1860. It was a 10-second fragment of the French folk song Au clair de la lune recorded by inventor Edward Leon Scott de Martinville. But who will make the final voice recording and when? What will it be? Who will hear it?